hear that, sheetheads? That's the sound of a brand new bootylicious anchor ad, heating up the intro with a sensual vibe, so you can start this episode of Breadsheet nice and soggy. Say, have you got ideas you want folks to hear? Well, nowadays it's titillatingly easy to broadcast yourself with Anchor. So download the free Anchor app or go to Anchor.fm to get started spraying your brain thoughts out into the ether. That's how I do it, monetization and all. And if it's good enough for Hoss Bossman, well, you know it's gonna leave you satisfied. Now why don't you slip into something a little more comfortable and prepare yourself for this week's edition of BREADSHEET. Intellectual dark wave. Intellectual dark wave. Yeah, I'm calling out my guess. Is that okay with you? Sorry, that's bad energy to bring right up top like that. I'm just challenging my guest to a fight at the K&K after school. Nothing out of the ordinary here. That's Intellectual Dark Wave on YouTube, Instagram, Bandcamp, Spotify. You can find him and his work at pretty much all the places you can get music. And you can find him here on this Breadsheet with me, Hoss Bossman.
Women be shouting, baby. Women be shouting, baby. Women be shouting. Women be shopping. Women be shopping. Women be shopping. That's true. Women do shop. That's true. Women do shop.
I would like to see the baby. I would like to see the baby. I would like to see the baby.
That is not a unit. That is not a unit.
I'm walking here.
I mean, give me a break, man.
Turd in the graveyard. Turd in the graveyard.
Turd in the graveyard.
It was a totally satanic demon I ate terrible about. It was a totally satanic demon I ate terrible.
A woman can do this.
God bless America.
You're all so lucky. You're all so lucky to live here.
He doesn't know. He doesn't know.
Give me back my stuff!
Give me back my stuff.
Oh, boy.
Wake up, little Susie. No.
You can do it. Oh, no.
Weird, wild stuff.
Where's the beat?
Big fluffy thing.
All right, I've got some big Breadsheet news. I mentioned this on the last Lil Babysode that I dropped that had a couple of Intellectual Darkwave songs on it. If you missed that one, go check that out. It's just like 2 songs, like a little mini EP, even shorter than, right, like a single, I guess, with the B-side on it.
Actually, it's 3 songs. And I did this radio DJ thing that I think turned out pretty funny, or at least cute. So check that out.
And get stoked for this interview. Like, pause this, listen to that, and come back and listen to this. But, the Breadsheet news. I am committing myself to a regular release schedule. It's supposed to help with like attracting and maintaining an audience, and I've been paying literally 0 attention to consistency with this show, but I am now hereby committing myself to, my hand is over my heart right now. My hand is over my heart, and I'm sitting on a Bible. I commit myself to releasing an episode at least once a month on the fourth Monday of every single month. A big part of the reason I'm committing to this is that having a deadline will maybe keep me from over tweaking and obsessing over podcast episodes. Art is never finished, it is only abandoned, as Thomas Jefferson once said, or maybe Shakespeare. Moliere.
Turd in the graveyard.
Welcome to the show. I got a lot of Hoss news a-brewing, but I'm trying to tighten up these intros.
It's actually in Revelations, actually.
Join my Patreon if you can. I finally started posting exclusive material there, and it's currently only available to my beautiful crew of two. That's Sansi and Sagboat, or Sansi and Samuel, the ground floor patrons of Hoss. Alrighty, time to ramp up to the interview. Next episode will be Jordan Holmes. I'm going to do something a little different with that one and talk with a couple of Knowledge Fight fans about what they love about the show and incorporate them into the episode somehow or another. One little note, we mostly talk about evergreen topics, but this interview was recorded when Kanye was the main character of reality for a couple months, or excuse me, Ye. So we do talk about that a little bit, but mainly as a springboard for talking about mental health and anti-Semitism and all that stuff. Also, I hope it wasn't offensive in the way I sort of spoke to Mr. Darkwave as if he's like the spokesperson for all Jewish people. I obviously didn't mean to come off that way if I did. I'm just a curious guy, and I didn't grow up around like any Jewish people, and I still know very few, so I had some questions. Isn't that what I'm supposed to do? I was interviewing him. Here is Mr. Intellectual Darkwave's song, then his interview. You will love it all, so go on with your lovin'. I'll be back at the end to kiss your forehead as I tuck you into bed. I've been trying to look and like remember how I found your channel to begin with. I don't know if it was like recommended to me. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Intellectual Darkwave, otherwise known as. Do you want your real name out there? Or you want to stick with the stage name?
Yeah, my real name's fine.
Okay, Matt. I just learned actually your name is Matt,
yeah.
Right? From the Zoom call.
Yeah.
But also known as Intellectual Darkwave, awesome YouTube channel with some cool, a wider variety of music than you might think from the name, but also satisfying from what you might think you're getting based on the name. And I was, I don't know if I found your channel, like I put up a few, maybe a year ago, I put up or no, it was this past Labor Day. I put up a cover I did of the Billy Bragg song, There Is Power in a Union. And I think maybe I was like searching for that or something and found your Joe Hill thing, which is very, when I first heard that Billy Bragg song, I was like, this must be like a cover of an old like folk, Union anthem or something. But I'm pretty sure that's a Billy Bragg original with the same title as an old folk anthem.
I think the melody comes from like a different hymn, but the lyrics are definitely Billy Bragg's.
Okay, yeah. It definitely has that like hymn sort of feel to it. Plus, and the lyrics themselves are like pretty, I don't know, they have a timeless feel to them, like you would want an anthem like that to have. I made a poster that I hang up in my classroom that's my favorite line in that song. Money speaks for money, the devil for his own. Who comes to speak for the skin and the bone? That's just some good poetry right there. So I don't know. Were you ever? This was like kind of the thing I've been wondering is were you ever like featured or like get a shout out or something on like Majority Report or like a bigger show like that at some point?
Yeah. So I've been on Thought Slime's given me a couple shout outs. I got Eyeball Zoned, and then I think like it was last year that I won an IB award. And yeah, I've been on Majority Report a couple of times.
Oh, okay, so you've been on like as a guest. I don't know if I've ever seen that.
Oh, no, not as a guest. They've just played my music.
Oh.
I did a song called Cold Feet that was, as you might guess, about Steven Crowder. And they played the original version, and then I did for some reason, I got into animation and did a little cartoon version of, well, I did a new version of the song, and I decided I wanted to put out like an actual video for it. And I just learned how to do animation, so I made this little cartoon of like Steven Crowder and Charlie Kirk setting up shop at an elementary school to debate children, and Sam Cedar showing up, and hilarity ensues, etc. And I think they played that on there as well.
Okay, I don't know if I've seen that one. I went through and did like I wouldn't say binged I didn't watch every video on your channel, I don't think, but I watched like several. Went through and went back when I found your channel, and like I said before when I was introducing you, lots of variety on your channel. And congratulations on getting featured on Majority Report. And now that I think of it, I think that is the first place I saw you was Thought Slime, the Eyeball Zone, which I never got Eyeball Zoned. I got the Surfs. They do their little ad for leftist thing, or they used to do that. That got me like a big bump in subscribers and stuff. But it's cool, in the leftosphere, good, it's, go figure, the people, I've said this before, like, the people whose like whole ideology is based around like fairness and empathy and compassion and stuff are like super cool to like smaller creators, and like always willing to give them a boost and help them out. So that's very cool of them. And I guess I'll go just start with the profile thing now, because we've been kind of going here for a second. So do you have like an elevator pitch for your work? Lots of variety, like I said. And I'm always interested to hear like whenever somebody asks you at a cocktail party, something where like, somebody asks you like, oh, you make music. What's your YouTube channel like? Something like that. Like, well, what do you tell them?
Well, I'd say it's sort of in transition at the moment, but generally if it was a year ago, I would have said I do leftist parody music. I'm kind of, like I said, in transition to maybe doing some slightly more earnest music, but overall I would say I make funny leftist songs in whatever style fits the moment.
Okay, but
I'm kind of coalescing into a more I guess like country synth pop thing.
I don't know if I've heard that combination before. Yeah, I mean, like, there's like country radio, which, I mean, I don't know how you feel about like pop country. I think it's, very. I
grew up on it, so,
Yeah, I definitely, I grew up on like 80s, 90s pop country, and I still love all that stuff. In fact, I've been playing guitar for a long time, like as a singer-songwriter kind of thing, like not really focusing on like getting where I can shred or whatever. But the past couple years, I think mainly because I've been living in a place where I don't have like other musicians I can play with. So I've been more kind of focused on like improving my just like playing ability. And one of the things I've always really wanted to do is learn how to like do chicken picking stuff. And I actually just yesterday, I think, made a breakthrough in like, I'm trying to learn that Vince Gill song, like every note of One More Last Chance, because it's got such a kind of standard country feel. I figured like, I bet I can learn a lot of like discrete techniques by just like learning this one song the whole way through. But like, yeah, country synth pop, I'm sure like a lot of people listening probably are very curious about what that sounds like. And so the reason I brought up like pop country is because obviously it's very different from what you would like Georgia, Florida line or whatever, like the kind of like country mixed with like pop, almost hip hop kind of sensibilities and stuff like that. It's not like that, right? It's kind of more like an 80s mixed with like something.
Yeah. Probably one of my big reference points musically is like 80s Ronnie Millsap, especially like one of my favorite songs is She's Always in Love. And that's like a very compositionally, it's like a very straightforward country song, but there's no acoustic instruments on it, or no even electromechanical instrument. It's literally like all synthesizers and drum machines, and then like all these like 4-part like close harmonies on top of it, and it's great. But that's kind of like what I was listening to a lot of last year, and just kind of started playing around with that. It really, for what it's worth, the real genesis of it was that when we withdrew from Afghanistan, and the 20th anniversary of 20 years of September 11th came up. So speaking of pop country radio, you know the song "Have You Forgotten" by Daryl Worley?
Yes, I do. I know that song very well. I used to laugh at the music video a lot as like in college and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. That song that drove me crazy in college because of the lyrics. Like I hated the lyrics so much, but I liked the song a lot, and I was like, you know what? It's the right time. I'm rewriting this song to be anti-war, so I can like sing it and not feel like disgusting. So I just like rewrote the lyrics and did a cover of it, and I think I released it on like the 20th anniversary of September 11th, and that was the first country song that I did. And I'd also just gotten like a lap steel a couple months before that and was really into like lap steel. So that was another thing that just kind of got me onto doing like more twangy rootsy stuff. Before that I was very much, well, I was still kind of all over the place, but very very much like halfway between like Devo and Depeche Mode probably, and now I've just absorbed country into that as well.
Cool. Yeah, I mean that's kind of like similar, or in a way, I grew up listening to country, and then sort of as a teenager, I got really, really into punk rock, and it's probably my favorite genre of music still, but and so like stepped away from liking country for a long time, and then finally like sort of in college rediscovered like how much I love like that kind of classic country and that sort of like sheen of the 90s, 80s kind of stuff, like what you were talking about. And that's what, my band just wound up being, the band I had throughout college wound up being like a country punk band. And so it is, you just take in what you like and sort of try to make it your own thing. And yeah, so I'll have a few more specific questions about music, the like musical elements themselves. But first, I'm going to ask you a little bit about politics stuff. So how old were you when you first like started getting into or interested in politics, like to the maybe like starting the progression to you're obviously very into politics now? Like when did your current kind of political views start forming, would you say?
13 or 14. I mean, they weren't very sophisticated, but it literally was as simple as I got into punk, and maybe not right away because I was listening to like, pop punk. I mean, the first band that I got into was Blink-182 in, 1997 when Damn It came out. But pretty quickly I went and started getting into like smaller labels, and eventually probably within a year or so, I had started ordering records or tape cassettes, and a lot of them would come with like little flexi discs of Noam Chomsky speaking or Mumia speaking or things like that, and just started listening to those, and I was like, okay, I'm an anarchist now, and not really knowing what that meant, but
sure. Yeah, that, I mean, very similar thing for me. That's how I found a lot of like the artists I love is from liner notes and stuff. Billy Bragg. I found Billy Bragg from the liner notes in a Less Than Jake album, of all places. Yeah, like I said, very similar to how I, first kind of getting into the attitude element and then kind of seeing what all that represented and getting sort of more pulled into that. What kind of like, where did you grow up? Actually, first, where are you right now, thereabout in the country?
Baltimore.
Okay. Did you are you from there and grow up there?
Yeah, grew up here. Lived here my entire life except for college, when I moved an hour down south to University of Maryland and then moved back after college.
Okay. So a Maryland man through and through.
Yeah.
And I gotta say, I don't know much about Baltimore. I applied for a couple jobs there because it seemed like kind of a cool place to live. Like, at least like I thought I'd like the climate, I think. But I've never even seen The Wire. I don't really know anything about that. Takes place in Baltimore, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So
you're better off for. I mean, The Wire's a really good show, but I wouldn't say that it's a great representation of everything Baltimore. It's not to say it's inaccurate. It's just a very narrow slice of Baltimore.
Sure.
Yeah. Baltimore is kind of like. It's kind of cliche to say this, but it's sort of where the North and the South meet. I always like to say that everyone here is kind of like a preppy redneck. We're like a little bit, kind of really just like halfway between that kind of New Englandy like coastal culture and but just like more rednecky.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what I remember my dad saying something about. No, Baltimore is still the South, or like Maryland is still like the South, kind of. And I just think of Maryland as part of New England, basically. But so it sounds like what kind of you're implying is that it's not a super conservative or super like liberal, left progressive kind of place either. Is it kind of like a little bit of everything?
It's politically it's a capital D Democrat place, and which is to say it's not necessarily liberal or conservative. It's just whatever the Democrats are doing is what everyone goes along with here. Like the Democratic Party is just like a very strong institution in the city. Culturally, I wouldn't say it's like super conservative, but there are definitely conservative elements, and it really depends on what part of the city you're in and which community. But it really runs the gamut culturally. I wouldn't say we have a whole lot of like. I mean, we have like there's some churchiness here, and like there's a lot of religious people. Like I'm Jewish, but like part of my family are like super religious, or like there's a very strong Orthodox Jewish community here that I'm not part of, but it kind of like not on the level of like Brooklyn, but it's probably the closer to that than anywhere else at least on the East Coast. But yeah, like there's also a lot of openness, and there's a pretty decently sized like leftist advocacy community. There's the LGBTQ community here is very strong. So it's not like the kind of place where you have to be like constantly buttoned up, and if you deviate from the norm in any way, then you're gonna get beat up. But in some neighborhoods it's like that, I guess, but most it's not, and it also depends on how far like into the county you go.
Okay, yeah, that I grew up in Georgia. I'm still in Georgia, but like the first 20 years of my life I lived in very like rural area where there were like literally, I think I knew one Jewish person growing up. There were like 30 black people at my high school, out of 1,500 or whatever. Like like very, very little diversity. And a few years ago I was working as a copywriter, and both the guys the other writers there were Jewish. And I remember like talking about like, oh, Thanksgiving's coming up or something, and like my stupid, crazy, like racist uncle, I'm going to have to like bite my tongue or decide to say things or whatever. And both of them were like, man, I don't relate to that at all. Like both of them are from the South, but they're like, yeah, one was like, my family's New York Jews. Like there are no like conservative, that type of conservative in my family anyway. So yeah, very different context.
Well, we actually have those kind of conservatives in the Jewish community quite a bit. One thing I will say is Baltimore is an extremely racist city. Even like all the other progressivism here aside. And in that sense, it's still very much like the like capital D, like Southern Democrat kind of mentality sometimes. Like this is the city where segregation was essentially had all of its like trial runs. All of like redlining was literally developed here.
I know I've heard that.
And like a lot of the racial tensions are still there. I mean, I think to some extent, I mean, obviously, like every city in the country has racial tensions, and even like New York has big issues, but Baltimore, it's very like it is very tense at times, and I have family members who are like incredibly racist, and I would almost say the the Jewish community here is probably more conservative than your average American Jewish community, and I don't have any I don't know why that is, other than maybe it's because of the large Orthodox community here. But it's funny, I kind of grew up in like the well, in a sense it was like a diverse neighborhood, but it really wasn't. I literally until probably high school I knew Jewish people and black people, and that was like all my to the extent that probably I don't know when I'm sure I figured it out sometime in elementary school, but like I just assumed that everyone was Jewish, and like the only like the they're like the primary difference between like the white people and black people is just that they were white and black, and I just assumed like all the black people that went to my school were Jewish too, because it was so heavily ingrained. And my school is probably about like 50, maybe a little more than 50% Jewish, and then maybe like 60% Jewish, 40% black. And then I also we had like a very high number of immigrants from the former Soviet Union as well. Oh, and also Israel. But there was this like program in the early 90s that was run by the Associated Jewish Charities, where they were basically paying to have like as soon as the Soviet Union collapsed. I think even before that, they were paying to have like Soviet Jews or Jews from former Soviet Union shipped over to Baltimore and kind of setting them up in the community. And I'm sure that like New York had some kind of equivalent to this, like probably on an even larger scale, but I don't think that there's that many cities. Like Baltimore was definitely one of the big hubs for the Associated to kind of like bring in immigrants from like Ukraine, Russia, Belarus, etc. And probably my growing up, my class in elementary school was probably at least 1/5. I mean, at the time they were all Russian. Like we didn't even know the difference between. I feel like that people have started figuring out more recently that the Soviet Union was more than just Russia. But as a kid, the Soviet Union and Russia were basically the same thing to me. And I mean everyone spoke Russian, so I didn't really have much of a delineation between if someone came from like Azerbaijan. I had one friend in high school who was born in Azerbaijan, and another one who was from Uzbekistan, but they were both Jewish, and just kind of like they both spoke Russian, but both ended up in Baltimore. And I think similarly up until probably middle school, I thought that that Russia was like a majority Jewish country because I knew so many people from Russia or from the former Soviet Union, and they were all Jewish, and I was like, oh well, this must be where all the Jews came. And I knew like my family came from there, so I was like, well, I guess that's like where all the Jews come from.
Is that like from that region, Jewish people? Is that the Ashkenazi? Like, is that what that word is applied to? I've never really been quite clear on that. I've always thought that's like
yeah.
Jews,
Basically, Central and Eastern Europe is Ashkenazim. So everything from Germany to Russia and in between. And then Southern Europe are Sephardim. And then some parts are kind of like, I mean, there's not that many Italian Jews, I don't think. My guess is they would be Sephardim, but generally the two big locuses for Jews were Spain and Portugal, which is where the majority of like the Sephardic Jews come from, and then Germany, Poland, Lithuania, Austria, Russia, etc.
You know, something that that Jews and Black people or people from African descent have in common is that diaspora, right? Like how there's just so many different, like, because of, you know, I mean, mainly because of like slavery and, you know, centuries and centuries of oppression. There's, you know, tons of like Jewish people and Black people kind of spread out all over the world. And kind of what I was just thinking about was how, you know, like everything you were just saying there, it's like so much more complicated than like that little like anecdote that I told, right? It's like, I just kind of always thought of like, well, Jews are a minority, so they're probably almost all like, you know, progressive liberals of some flavor or another. But with the exception, of course, of there's like definitely a strain of like hardline Israel folks, but other than that, but I mean, a lot of like Christian liberal, you know, or just like atheist liberal people are like, support Israel too. So, but same thing with like, you know, I live in a majority Black area now, and it's kind of like, you know, I was kind of just thought of like not growing up around many Black people, like Black people are progressive liberals, like universally, because they're a minority, right? Like, because that's in their interests or whatever. And then, you know, living here, it's like, this is a, like by far, you know, maybe like 80-90% Black area. And it's, like there's Black conservatives very different from what you like. It's not like Candace Owens and stuff, like crazy, like far right Republicans. Usually people who are just like very religious and have like sort of socially conservative views. So it's like in my mind, I have to like, you know, differentiate between like here, you know, all those stupid like laws about like, you can't talk about gay people and like you can't talk about racial issues. Obviously, like the CRT crap does not like apply here at all. But I do, you know, try to be a little bit careful how I talk about things like gay people because or like LGBTQ issues, because it's just like a very religious like community, you know. So I know they're not nearly as homophobic as like where I grew up, but like, you know, there's still kind of a strain of that. And it's just so much more complicated than like I mean, obviously the lines that we draw in politics are so arbitrary oftentimes. And it's like, the more you get to, I guess, like just the more you get to like understand individual and like group stories, the more it's like, damn, I really don't, this is way more complex than like my mind was just like jumping to before.
Yeah, and I think Baltimore is one of the more conservative Jewish communities in the country because I mean I remember going to college, and then I met a bunch of Jews from like the DC area, and they were all much more well-adjusted than anyone I knew growing up. I'm fairly certain, like especially like West Coast. I mean, you know, on the West Coast, people are generally more progressive anyway, but although even then, you know, there's plenty of pockets of the West Coast that are crazy. But yeah, I think Baltimore is one of the more conservative Jewish communities. But even then, Israel actually was not really the determining factor until sort of recently, when there's kind of been a big shift in the tide over the past maybe 10 years, where a lot of American Jews have kind of woken up to exactly what's going on in Israel and have not, you know, have like, I'm not necessarily like abandoned Israel completely, but become significantly more critical. But when I was, you know, like high school, college, there used to be this term PEP, Progressive Except Palestine, and it was like so common for you to meet like Jewish people who, I mean, I don't think they would have referred to themselves as labor Zionists. Some would have, actually. I knew people who were like, I got into socialism after I went to Israel. And it was like very much a thing for there to be people like for there to be Jewish people who are like super left on everything, and then like Israel's this giant blind spot. And I mean, even from what I understand, that exists outside of the Jewish community. I believe like in Germany it's a big thing of like people who are like effectively socialists, but they have hang-ups about the Holocaust, so they're like diehard Israel supporters, which is extremely weird to me, but it's, you know,
makes
it's
kind of like, it makes sense in a way that's like, I see how you got there, right? But it doesn't actually make sense.
Yeah. But I mean, more recently, I think American Jews are at least, if not necessarily ready to, you know, throw out like Zionism, they're at least a lot more primed to be critical of certainly like the Likud governments and to some extent like the entire structure of Israel as a whole.
Yeah, Israel is I have seen that like tide change you talked about like so profoundly. I mean, even just in the past few years, it's like so many more people talking about it in the terms of like, you know, this is settler colonialism, like, you know, just the definition of it, what, you know, has been going on in Israel the past, like, actually Israel is the exact same age as my dad, so it's 74 years old. Both, which is, you know, that's always I have that little factoid to, whenever I'm having like an argument with somebody, to pull out, like, it's like, yeah, Israel is the same age as my dad. And that puts things into context a little bit. But, it is like an issue where whenever somebody says something critical of Israel, you got to do a little bit of questioning to see where that's coming from. Cause I know like a lot of people don't like Alex Jones because he doesn't criticize Israel enough. And those people are fucking crazy, like, you know, right-wing reactionaries. But, I mean, that even probably is like too weak of a description, like, you know, neo-Nazis almost or whatever. But, I did want to ask you one more thing about, since, you know, I have a Jewish guest on here, Kanye. That, I mean, I might be sick of hearing about it or, you know, talking about it or whatever, but like, you know, my girlfriend and I have been sort of like, you know, we both work with kids and a lot of people with like mental health issues and stuff. And we are a lot more sympathetic's not the right word, but like a little bit more like whenever we see a lot of leftists talking about him, it's they speak in very absolute terms of like, you know, there's a lot of people who have mental health issues like that who don't resort to being like anti-Semites and bigots and stuff. But I mean, that doesn't really make any sense. I don't really know. That seems like a nonsense thing to say because, like, yeah, mental health expresses its way in like many different ways, right? And but there is like some people have said he said anti-Semitic stuff like 10 years ago and stuff. So I mean, I do, you know, I'm not saying he's like absolved of any like guilt or anything like that, but like. I don't know, my thought on it was just like, I think like as leftists, like our posture toward this should be kind of more like the way we try to think about like criminal justice and stuff. Like this guy needs help and he is, and you know, that's not making excuses for him. It's just like, I mean, same thing with like a prisoner or whatever, somebody who kills somebody. It's like, yeah, I'm not justifying that or trying to rationalize it or anything like that. Just like, I think we should be kind of like having a different conversation, though I do completely understand why, especially if you're Jewish, you're reacting, or people have like reacted in a very like visceral way. But what do you think of all that? Like, I just kind of spewed at you.
Well, I think there's two separate issues, and there's, on the one hand, Kanye himself like doing any kind of, you know, ultimate like moral judgment about his character. I'm not really that interested in that, but I think ultimately, yeah, that probably is a side effect. I mean, my mother was schizoaffective. So I've like grown up around literal psychosis. And I'm very well, and I work in my day job is working in disability. So I'm like pretty ingrained in mental health issues. But yeah, so like on a personal level, yeah, like he needs help. I don't like necessarily I don't really know what's going through his head. I don't know how much of it is mental illness. I don't and how much of it is like ideological. I really like, to me, the important thing is that he's got a huge platform and there are people who are going to hear it and probably take it seriously. And so whether or not it's a product of mental illness or sincerely held belief or whatever, I think just really the issue is we're giving too much oxygen to him. And honestly, like, someone should just like take away his internet access for like a few months. It would probably be better for him as well. And the world would just be a whole lot better if he didn't have internet access. And if he really wants to go on like anti-Semitic rants to I don't know, to Kim Kardashian when he's picking up the kids or something, like, I don't think that's really damaging anyone. It's really the platform is the issue, and that I think that's really the crux of it. Like, I don't really see much value in trying to like parse it on a personal level, because there are ultimately, this is from my experience with my mother and with some of the people that I've worked with. To some extent, you can't always like, there are people who have mental health problems that are, I'm not going to say they're not solvable, but they're not solvable by like any kind of force. And sometimes you just either have to wait for them to work out, or they might not, especially for people who have like any kind of psychosis, a lot of the time that's a big barrier to taking medicine. And that can, it can work a little better if they get injections, because at least like, they're not being, they don't have, you don't have to rely on them to take medicine every day. But ultimately there are some people who just aren't going to take their medicine, and ultimately, like, it's their life, like, and as long as they're not hurting people, it's really up to them. The issue with Kanye is that he's potentially hurting people, and so I think like the question is not so much how do you get him to stop having these views, and more so how do you just stop him from having like a negative public impact?
Yeah, like stop him from like spreading them around. And I mean, he's I guess it's almost like I was kind of reacting against like a lot of people, like right when he said the like straight up, Hitler was good kind of crap. A lot of people saying like, oh, he needs to be shunned, like this is way too far, and so I was kind of reacting against that. I might have reacted a little too far in the other direction though, because I do agree with what you're saying, like that the Adolph Reed, one of my favorite little lines of his is that, like, instead of being so worried about like whether or not like Joe Rogan is going to heaven or not, maybe we should be like more concerned with like what they're actually spreading around, and or like actual like material issues. And that is kind of, as you apply that same logic in both directions to Kanye, right? It's like maybe that question is sort of missing the point in a way. I mean, though, is Kanye going to, sure as hell is not going to Jewish heaven. He is, I guess just taking, that's such a like weird question of like, or like difficult question of like, taking away his platform, like what does that even mean? He like almost doesn't have one, so it's like he has all these people who are giving him one. Yeah, it's just a fucking mess.
Yeah, so I mean, in terms of like shunning Kanye, like if I don't entirely know like how that would work, but if I like if people feel bad about, like, I don't think people should feel bad about listening to his music if they like his music.
I'm with you there.
I just more so look at it from the standpoint of responsibly. Instagram should probably close his account, and like anyone who's going to have him on their who's going to like cover him on their news show or whatever is being a shithead. Like, just you know, if he's having if he's truly having like a psychotic episode, then this shouldn't be covered anyway, because why is that anyone's business? And like ultimately by giving it so much coverage, I think really all anyone is doing is just giving oxygen to the, you know, like the sensational views, which are the bad ones in this case, and they're not really, it's not helping him. Like, it's certainly, it's not spreading awareness of his mental condition or anything by like having everyone talk about it. Like, all it's really doing is you know, providing some people entertainment and like maybe giving some oxygen to these views for, you know, people. Some people will hear what he has to say and be like, oh, that sounds about right, and go along with it. And then the rest of the world is like having a laugh at his expense, which, I mean, don't get me wrong, I love having a laugh at celebrities' expenses.
Sure,
I'm all for like making fun of celebrities, but you know, in this case, if it is genuinely like a mental health thing, like maybe that's not something people should be you know, having. Maybe that's not the best thing to use for sensational news. And I just yeah, like I'm not saying like he should be cut off from the entire world and like locked up in an asylum or something. I just think that, you know, to whatever extent we can, like, he probably shouldn't be out in the media right now, because he's saying things that are harmful. And beyond that, like, I don't really, you know, care how people, you know, if his family wants to have a relationship with him, like, great, you know. And if his friend, I don't know who his friends are at this point, but you know, if people want to listen to his music, cool, you know, like, go for it.
Yeah, it's like that. If you like shunning him, as I'm sure you know, like that is not going to be helpful with or like if people in his life are like, that's probably not going to be helpful with the mental health stuff. But then obviously, like, having an audience of millions and millions of people isn't really helping with it either. So yeah, it's, I hope we tried to talk about it responsibly here. You did. I hope I didn't like say anything weird, but no,
I mean, to be honest, I think a lot of the news coverage is probably doing more harm than good, just because Alex Jones's platform has been severely hamstringed at this point. And like he's not on any of the major streaming platforms. He literally only broadcasts on his website to largely paying customers who are, you know, in my opinion, probably not all that worth engaging with anyway at this. You know, it's like, it's one thing if he's, you know, on YouTube and the algorithm's constantly like throwing that in people's faces, but that's not the case anymore. He's not on YouTube, he's not on Spotify, he's not on any major platform other than the one that he owns. And ultimately, if Kanye is going to go on there and say anti-Semitic stuff, like, okay, big, like, yeah, that's like every day on Alex Jones. It's nothing new.
Sure.
I honestly, I think like doing the whole kind of like sensational coverage of this probably does more harm than good, because more people are actually hearing it. And I doubt the people who listen to Alex Jones regularly are the kind of people who are going to be swayed by Kanye. Like, they probably either have those views or they aren't going to listen to anything that a black man says. And, you know, the kind of people where Kanye might actually push the needle in terms of like sparking seeds for anti-Semitism are the kind of people who, well, number one, like younger people, probably, but they're not the ones who are listening to the Alex Jones show. So they're all getting all this because, you know, now like everyone in the media is like, oh my God, did you hear what Kanye said? And then, you know, all these people who do take Kanye seriously are like, oh, well, maybe, you know, he has a point there. And if he had just kind of been locked out of the media, then it wouldn't be an issue. But this, of course, ends up being something that makes the media a lot of money. It's, you know, it's gonna get a lot of clicks, so they run with it.
Sure. Well, in the spirit of not dwelling on it too long, do you have a hard out? By the way, it's 10 o'clock right now. You know, okay.
Nope, I don't have a birthday party to go to this weekend.
Okay,
thankfully.
excellent. Well, we'll go maybe, I don't know, maybe 15, 20 more minutes, something like that, if that's all right.
Okay.
And so let's move on to somewhat related to what we're just talking about, political art. I guess, you know, the first thing, like, ask a very basic question here, but like what characteristics does something need to have just to be like considered art? Play the art decider real quick. And I mean, a basic question, but you know, everybody kind of has a different answer to this. So what is art? What makes something art?
I'm too much of a postmodernist for this question. For it to be art, it has to be called art. That's the only.
I'm pretty much.
That's the only qualifier for me.
Sure. Yeah. I guess that's how I think about. I'm a big like linguistics nerd. I'm an English teacher, and so I read a lot about linguistics and stuff. And I almost did a like PhD program in linguistics many years ago. But that's, you know, one of the things that I hear people arguing about, like terminology or labels. But what's the definition? We're going to settle this argument with the dictionary or whatever. It's like the words only mean what we kind of agree for them, you know, to actually mean. And, you know, you, especially like, you know, something that is by its very nature subjective, like art, you know, that's going to be, but, you know, to be sort of like, I guess, worth consuming, I guess you just sort of have the broadest kind of like definition of it, as I pretty much do as well. And what you do is like by definition art, right? Like anybody would call making music art. But are there any like?
You'd be surprised.
I would definitely call what you make art, and you know, in general, you know, music is. But are there? I guess you did say that you were into punk music. Like, are there any like specific political musical artists who you would like name as your biggest influences?
Joe Hill is kind of an obvious one. But yeah, I mean, a lot of the standard ones: Joe Hill, Woody Guthrie, Pete Seeger, Billy Bragg, various punk bands. I mean, the ones that like directly influential on me. I don't even listen to them anymore. I don't think I've listened to them in like 20 years. But Os Rotten were a band that I was really into and got me thinking about a lot of things. Crass were another one that like I have not listened to. The closest I've come to listening to Crass in probably 10 years is Croy and the Boys did a cover of Do They Owe Us a Living? And at this point, I far prefer his honky tonk version of that to the original. But Phil Oakes. So yeah, like a lot of the protest singers. I probably Phil Oakes and Joe Hill right now because they are the funniest ones. And they do they did sort of like the best. I mean, Joe Hill was literally a parody songwriter, but I tend to have a short tolerance for like overly not overly sincere, but overly self-serious political music. Like I can't deal with it if it's just like if it doesn't have a sense of humor. That's kind of my attitude to like most media that I consume is just if there isn't at least some amount of humor in it, it is boring to me.
Yeah, that self-seriousness. It's like, Majority Report. It's like that show is probably one of the, I mean, compare it to any like mainstream news crap, and it's like that's probably one of the most like in-depth, like getting down into the nitty-gritty, like talking about policy and like getting very specific and having experts on and stuff. Like, they talk about stuff sometimes it's like kind of over my head. And, it doesn't, Michael Brooks was even worse about that. Like he would have people on that was like, man, y'all are talking about some stuff that I really need to read up on to like get what this conversation's all about. But those guys, Michael Brooks was like his big thing was, that he was always joking around about everything. And Sam Cedar, that show is like 90% of the time they're not like joking around, but they don't take themselves so seriously like so many other like liberal and conservative people do. And I think there's definitely something to that like that makes like delivering a political message like so much more effective when you make it kind of palatable, but also like you deliver it in a way that has like a humility to it. And so I don't know so I guess you definitely like use humor in a lot of your songs. The most recent one I think was the Demotivated, right?
Yeah. Well, I guess technically the most recent song I put out is In Plain Sight, which is really a B-side to Friday Night Death Slot, but that's the Demotivated is I guess my most recent actual single, but because I have I'm like all over the place. I'm very like typically ADHD brained. I don't really release everything on the same platform at the same time. Even though I probably should.
Yeah, that's the whole like being a creator, releasing stuff, timing, marketing yourself, and all that crap is just so time consuming, and it's like such an important part of like if you want to try to grow your audience and stuff. But it's like if you have a job, that shit sucks. It's so boring and just
yeah.
But so do you think like political art, it's just like, do you think it can play a role in like affecting real world change? Like what do you think its role is in like actual politics?
I tend to think that it can be very helpful. I tend to think it's more helpful along the lines of like what Phil Oakes used to do, where you're kind of like in a cheerleader sort of role. I don't, or Joe Hill for that matter, where you show up to protests and like rile everyone up with songs, which is what both of them used to do. I do think that to some extent there's value in trying to like change people's minds, but I don't necessarily think it's the most effective. I mean, all you have to do is look at how many conservatives love Rage Against the Machine, and even song like Killing in the Name of is a song it's literally just sloganeering. Like that's all, that's what the lyrics, it's literally sloganeering, and there's still so many people who miss the point. So I think if you're like trying to kind of go at like evangelize, I don't necessarily think it's always gonna work. But at the same time, that's kind of, I've been trying to be more subtle about things lately, more so out of I just kind of got bored of writing songs about Jordan Peterson, but had to move on to something else. So and I've been involved in a labor dispute at my job, so I've kind of been writing about that. And so I've been writing a lot of songs about hating my boss, which I feel like is probably relatable, and it's a good subject for country music.
Long tradition.
But at the same time, I'm kind of like, this is probably more relatable to like your average country fan than like my songs about Steven Crowder. But at the same time, if like some random like conservative country music listener like listens to one of my songs that's, on the more subtle side, I don't necessarily expect that they're gonna, hear it and suddenly become a Marxist. Maybe they'll start thinking about it in different terms, or maybe they'll be like, maybe they'll find out about my politics and decide to listen. But I really think like the more useful stuff is being like a cheerleader or making people feel heard. For me, probably the most made me feel like I was having the most impact. The first country song that I actually like released, not that was like an original, not the Have You Forgotten cover, but was Spamburgers in Paradise. And I guess I was actually, that was probably also the first one where I was trying to be a little more subtle and be like, make it sound a little more like a normal country song at first, and then throw in the politics kind of halfway through and sneak up on people. And a lot of that really, I got a lot of like angry pushback from conservative country listeners. But what was really worthwhile about it, there was one person who just like randomly commented on an Instagram post, and they were a native Hawaiian Islander, and they were like, I've been trying to tell people about this for years, and like I feel like I'm talking into a void, and people think that I'm just like insane for having like issues with American occupation, and like this really just felt like such a breath of fresh air and made me feel heard, and like thank you so much. And so it ended up being like not the audience I was even going for, but it was like because like I said, I was my thought line was like, oh, I'm gonna like maybe I'll sneak this into country radio or something, and start like polluting people's minds with that, but which was a total flop. But then that was probably like the most gratifying thing that I've had so far, where someone was like, hey, the song makes me feel seen, and makes me feel like I'm not like completely wasting my time being involved in in this issue. And so I've kind of come back around to that being my view, that political music is good. Like the most good that it can do is kind of like the cheerleader role, and make people just make people feel like there are other people like them out there, like they're not completely alone. And so I guess that's also about being relatable, but it's being relatable in a different sense. It's being relatable to people who might already be leftists, or might already have like at least compatible views on one issue, and letting them know that there's there's a movement out there waiting for them, and it's not just they're not just like screaming out into the void.
That's kind of similar to how, like, I mean, music in general, or like songs that have nothing to do with politics, that are about very personal stuff, like just connecting with other people, making and having like an audience, a way for them to feel seen, encouraged, related to in some way. And then, with like, and art in general, I think I don't like more people appreciating art and thinking about art, and cultivating their creativity and imaginations and stuff, whether it's by making it or consuming art, like, and thinking about art. I think that society is going to be better with more people doing that.
Yeah. But yeah, I think in terms of like changing people's minds, that's probably, I don't know, maybe there are people who are better at it than I am. I have not had a whole lot of luck with it. I think that there's probably better ways to change people's minds. But I mean, also in terms of changing people's minds, it's kind of, that's like the long game. No one really hears an argument and suddenly says, oh yeah, that's right. It's like, they have to hear the same thing over and over again, and then maybe eventually it seeps in. So I don't know. But in terms of like the the kind of like positive feedback that I've gotten, especially with doing the country stuff, is people who are like, oh, I didn't think that this was out there, and now I feel less despondent, which to a lot of extent is what I get out of music. So
Sure, yeah, me too. Well, I've got. I'm just gonna do. Let's see. Run through this lightning round, which I just kind of came up with. Like, I used to like have a handful of questions I would ask at the end, which I'll ask you one of those. But I thought it'd be fun to do like just some favorite, do the high fidelity thing and do this some top fives or top whatever favorite, top three, whatever you want to do. So movies. What are some of your favorite movies?
Ooh, let's see. Metropolitan is definitely up there. I'm a big Whit Stillman fan. I used to say Annie Hall was my favorite movie, but in recent years, I'm kind of like having a harder and harder time with Woody Allen for obvious reasons. Network is another one of my favorites.
That's one of mine for sure.
Yeah, and I love a lot of like the kind of like 70s like dark but funny kind of stuff. King of Comedy, well, I guess that's an 80s movie, but similar vein. And in terms of recent stuff, I have like very in terms of the recent movies that I've seen that I liked, they're kind of like very run of the mill. Like Sorry to Bother You was very much up my alley, and I can't really think of any. I guess like Us was really good. What else do I really like? The Evil Dead movies.
I think that's the first thing you've named that I'm familiar with that was not political in nature in some way.
Yeah, I like funny horror as well. That's probably like where I gravitate to. It's either funny horror like Sam Raimi or like Brian Usna kind of stuff, or it's like kind of classic 70s film school, but like the funnier side of that. So like more Network and Annie Hall than, well, I do like Dog Day Afternoon a lot too, but I actually I'm not like super obsessed with The Godfather or like a lot of people are. I like stuff that's a little lighter, I guess.
Okay, yeah. When I was just trying to think of example, like 70s movies, I'm definitely very lacking on my knowledge there. Like like I said, Network is one of my favorite movies of all time. In fact, a few months ago, I remember my girlfriend had never seen it, and so I've seen it several times, like 5 times or whatever throughout my life, and so I was thinking like, all right, we'll put this on. She'll be watching it. I'm going to be like doing something on my computer or whatever, cause I've seen this, but I like, as soon as the movie started, I was like eyes on the screen until the very end of the movie. It's like so crazy to me that a 70s drama about a news station like that is like, it's a great movie, but it's also like so like compelling, just like draws you in from the very first moment. Definitely the type of movie, like when I was younger, I would have said that sounds boring as hell. But yeah, and when I was trying to think of examples of 70s movies just now, is that Kramer versus Kramer. Like that's like the first one I think of, like, they used to make serious adult movies. I guess Kramer versus Kramer's like about a custody battle or something. But I've never seen that, but yeah, it sounds like you have a big interest in political stuff. And even, is Brian Usna, is that the guy who directed Society? Do you know what movie I'm talking about?
I do not. I'm thinking like the Reanimator series.
Okay, those I guess I think Brian Usna, I think he wrote or directed Society, which is kind of like that's my favorite. One of my favorite movies of all time probably is From Beyond. I love those, like 80s Lovecraft. I mean, those two are great.
Yep.
Reanimator and From Beyond. But and then I discovered, like, I've been trying to like just go through. I wanted to watch every like 80s practical effects gory like rubber movie there is, and the Society was one a little bit more obscure that I found, but has awesome practical effects in it and is super on the nose, very political in a very like fun, interesting way. I highly recommend it.
All right, I'll definitely have to look that up. Oh yeah, and I like Cronenberg a lot. Like Videodrome's probably my favorite Cronenberg movie because it's like visually like really wild.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love a good practical effect.
Yeah, Cronenberg is he's like the elevate, or like the hoity-toity kind of film school level of the just like 80s gore practical effect guy, right? You always get the sense Cronenberg's got something he's trying to say or something. I don't know going on there. But okay, so favorite, let's see, we kind of already talked about music. Any like albums or artists or anything that you would like to mention or anything like that?
Political stuff or in general?
Anything.
Probably my biggest loves are like Prince and Hall & Oates and Vince Gill. I'm really into like the last couple Pure Prairie League albums when Vince Gill came on, and his first couple solo albums are just like phenomenal to me.
Yeah.
Kind of before he became like a guitar hero, back when he was still, trying to be, I guess, like a pop star, but he has a great voice. I love it.
Yeah.
Great songwriter. Hall & Oates were just phenomenal. Prince, I especially like earlier Prince, like Dirty Mind is probably my favorite Prince album. I like a lot of like 70s, 80s power pop. The records are like the first Records album is one of my favorites. And I like a lot of stuff that I grew up on, like 90s rap and I still listen to a lot of like 90s country, but as far as like hip hop goes, I'm like a really big DJ Quick fan. Like I really like his production a lot. He's a pretty good rapper too. I actually, this is kind of like blasphemy to say, but I actually kind of like him more than Dr. Dre. I like still like a lot of the early Cash Money stuff, like all the like the Hot Boys and Big Timers, and just like love the just the sound on those. Manny Fresh was just really great. And then I'm kind of like all over the place after that. I bounce around from genre to genre. Like recently I've been listening to a lot of Western swing, like a lot of like early Merle Travis and like Bob Wills and that kind of stuff. But yeah, I kind of like I said, I'm like super ADHD brain, so I don't really stick with anything for that long, which I guess is also why my music is all over the place. But yeah, so like my recent thing has been Western swing, and that's probably partly because I have been playing lap steel, and I just got a pedal steel a little while ago and have been learning to play that. So that's a
whole different beast, right?
Yeah.
That at some point, I used to play for a couple years. I was kind of like working as a bass player for hire, and this main country artist I played with was his name's John King. He's still, he lives in Nashville and still tours all the time. I don't think he's like broken through like he's wanted to yet, but he why did I bring him up? Oh, he had this guitar player when I was playing with him that was like by far the most amazing guitar player I've ever like seen play in person. And I mean, he could play every genre, and he could totally get that country chicken picking sound like perfect. And he, using a volume pedal and a slide, could totally recreate the sound of a pedal steel. Like, I mean, I'm sure it's not, not perfect with that setup, but like, just with his guitar and a slide and a volume pedal could get, the sound definitely good enough for like a live show. And I was always like so impressed by that, but it always just seemed like magic to me. I'm just like, I'm never going to even try to figure out how to do that. But okay, so I just really have one last question, which is good because I really have to pee. I don't know if you noticed me like kind of shifting around. I drink too much coffee and water, but hey, I actually recently found, I've been trying to figure out a way to have less mouth noises in my like speech recordings and my singing, but you can really hear those, like that kind of stuff. One of the things I saw was, it's counterintuitive, but make sure your mouth is like hydrated, because all those noises, they actually come from your mouth being dry, even though it kind of sounds wet or whatever. So anyway, So this is the question. I think I've asked this to every guest. If you could snap your fingers and change one thing about the U.S. government, and like, policy wise or whatever, you get creative with however you want to answer it. Some people do like, well, I think this would have this chain reaction. Some people think, this is just the most important thing. Do you have anything that comes to mind to that question?
How granular do I have to be? I'm assuming I can't just say like a dictatorship of the proletariat or something like that.
Well, I mean, I don't know. That's maybe you're kind of Kobayashi Maruing the question, but which is, I think, fun.
Let me think. Honestly, probably ranked choice voting.
Okay, I haven't heard that one yet. I can imagine a lot of the ways like that would change things. It's kind of similar to, usually my answer to this would probably be like just get money out of politics. I don't think that would make everything perfect, but I think it would like alleviate a lot of issues that we have. What kind of ripple effects do you think that would have?
It would give people more of an opportunity to just vote outside of the Democratic and Republican parties. I don't necessarily think it would result in like third party ascendancy, but it would create enough of pressure that the left wing of the Democrats would actually have to, or that the Democrats would actually have to like give in to their left wing. And I mean, it would also just, I think, make people more involved in the process, because right now there's so many people who are cynical that are just like, my vote doesn't matter. And with ranked choice, you get a little more of a sense that it does matter. Either that, or I mean, honestly, like true universal free healthcare, I think would also be a game changer. But at the same time, like they have that in other countries, and England is not doing that great. But I do think that it would be a big boost for the labor movement, and just for having the ability to like strike without worrying about losing your health insurance, being able to just quit without, having like a safety net to just say, you know what, I'm done with this job, fuck you, sorry, can I
well, you can curse, no.
Okay. But yeah, just like to just be able to say, take this job and shove it, and not have the severe consequences that come with that. Because right now it really is very hard to quit your job, especially if you have a family, if you have like kids and you're like counting on, like it's one thing if you're like single and you're like, okay, I'll figure it out. Like if I'll just like take a lot of vitamin C and try to avoid, like, be really careful. But like if you have kids and you don't have health insurance, life gets real hard.
Yeah, I mean, damn near like impossible, I would think, in a lot of cases. Yeah, that, I mean, what you said about ranked choice, it's like that. I think England, or definitely a lot of countries in Europe, have like publicly funded elections, and getting money out of politics obviously didn't like fix everything there. It is interesting to think about like what kinds of attitudes and beliefs and stuff would be kind of revealed as being way more popular, maybe way less popular, but if we had something like ranked choice voting, to really get a much better sense of like where everybody is at, like on the spectrum or whatever.
Yeah, and I guess this is under me being under the assumption that the polling is accurate, which who knows, but based off of like a lot of the polling that's out there, a lot of the country is much further to the left than, or at least the general populace is much further to the left than I think a lot of people give it credit for. It's just that because of the way the country's government because of like all the voting structures, there's like a very anti-majoritarian structure where the country is essentially being run by like the votes of like 5% of the population. Like there's, I mean, I don't know, maybe maybe I'm going to change my answer and actually just say get rid of the Senate and the Supreme Court and just have Congress.
I think those would also be have some massive ripple effects, and or at least like completely change the way we do it, in both of those cases, right? Like they're so obviously both very undemocratic in their own ways.
But yeah, I mean, really, the way the country is run, we're very much beholden to. I don't want to say we're beholden to like rural interests, because I don't really think it's so much that, but it's there are low population areas that have very outsized interests. And I mean, like rural interests don't get anything either, other than like, you know, like corporate farms. Corporate farms get a lot of subsidies, but to a large extent, like the average people living out in small towns who are they're in just as dire straits as people in cities. But like, I guess maybe it's the suburbs that I'm really aiming at, because I think like the suburbs really control the country, and there's really not as much population there as the amount of power that they have. And I think like getting rid of the Senate and the Supreme Court would probably tilt that more towards.
Yeah, it's almost like the cities and the rural areas need each other and have like a lot of interests in common that are not shared by the suburban folks in a way. Yeah. Well, I guess that'll do it. Do you have anything else you want to add? And if not, where can people find you, follow you? Anything in particular you want to promote right now?
Yeah. So, I've got some new music out, on Spotify, Apple, whatever streaming platform you like, and I've also got a new-ish video for Demotivated on my YouTube channel, so youtube.com/intellectualdarkwave. You can follow me on Instagram. I post a lot of I don't know, not behind the scenes stuff, but you know, I do like reels and some live performances and stuff like that on there. And I'm just Intellectual Darkwave on Instagram. I have a very underused TikTok account as well that I'm not going to plug. But yeah, everywhere else, Intellectual Darkwave. I will probably be releasing some stuff with my band, the Computer Cowboys, in the near future. And I'm not sure exactly when that's going to be out, but that's going to be more country-oriented stuff, and probably have some like actual live banjo and accordion and stuff like that on there. And
that's awesome. That's a great band name, by the way.
Thank you. Came from a Neil Young song on another one of my favorites. And one of my favorite Neil Young albums, Trans, is very much like my ethos of the kind of like retro futuristic chewed up version of roots music.
I'll make sure people know that up top, and say the name, other places to find you and stuff. And then I'll probably close this episode out. Actually, I could just say it right now at the end of the interview. Usually I have to record this part at the end. We're going to close out with an Intellectual Darkwave song. I haven't decided which one it is yet, but you sent me a couple tracks, so you'll be hearing one of those, and I'll probably use like a robot voice to say the title of it. So
I'm excited to hear my theme song.
Yes, that's the part that like why I'm not just gonna release this today is because I still got to work on that a little bit. But I'll let you know like when it's up or when I'm about to put it up.
All right, cool.
All right, well, thanks so much for your time, man. You're very generous with your time. I really appreciate it, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your Sunday. And I will see you around.
Yeah, likewise.
All right, peace out.
And that's going to do it for this episode. Cool interview, right? I'm going to play this episode out with Intellectual Darkwave's song, She Don't Work for Free. Check out the most recent episode of Breadsheet before this one to hear more Intellectual Darkwave songs, 3 of them to be exact, and my Morning Zoo fun. The show is already a few days late. I have missed my first deadline, mainly because I was so absorbed in making Intellectual Darkwave's theme song. It sounds pretty badass though, right? If I want to toot my own horn, but it's like real heavy, and I was pretty happy with how that turned out.
Go check out Intellectual Darkwave's YouTube channel, his Bandcamp, find him on Apple Music and Spotify and all that, and Instagram as well. Find all my crap at www.hoss.fun for all your Hoss needs. And go check out my YouTube channel, which is called Hoss Bossman, at youtube.com/Hoss Bossman. Tune in on Monday, March 27th, when my guest will be the great Jordan Holmes of the also great Knowledge Fight podcast. I've been Hoss Bossman, this has been Breadsheet. Please enjoy this awesome Intellectual Darkwave's song, She Don't Work for Free. And make sure you flood the souls of all sentient beings with healing light. I love you. Wow.
She don't work for free. She's a busy girl with things to do. She don't work for free. She isn't in this world just to service you. It doesn't matter how big you are. She doesn't care if you're a movie star or any other celebrity. Oh boy, she don't work for free. She isn't looking for experience. Her time is worth more than friends. She knows the game that you play. If you want her, you have to pay. She don't work for free. She's a busy girl with things to do. She don't work for free. She isn't in this world just to service you. It doesn't matter how big you are. She doesn't care if you're a movie star or any other celebrity. Oh boy, she don't work for free. Don't even think that you're the first who tried to pay less than she's worth. She's got clients to get, so don't try to treat her that way. She don't work for free. She's a busy girl with things to do. She don't work for free. She isn't in this world just to service you. It doesn't matter how big you are. She doesn't care if you're a movie star or any other celebrity. Oh boy, she don't work for free.